Okay, recording is on. To open the debate, calling first speaker from Affirmative. Here.
I would like to confirm that I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Uh, Holy, okay. I'll start my speech in three, two, one. The full card in tarot tells you to take the leap of faith, to take the opportunity, but behind it all, they implore you to learn to be informed in the decisions you're making because ahead of you is an immediate chasm that you need to be able to jump over. A few key points of framing. First, we live in a capitalistic world where the threshold of achievement continues to rise with the proliferation of literacy, whether media, education, or financial. This indicates a world where no one has a fair starting advantage in life. No one has the same safety net of parents' money or connections that can sustain you throughout your university or even career life. It requires the building of a solid foundation before we are able to then commit into an opportunity to secure for the longevity and sustainability of a person's life in a capitalistic world that is defined by the key metric of KPI, which leads to compensation usually in the form of capital or wages needed to sustain life. Second, picturization. The narrative then looks like people seizing every opportunity then they find because of the mindset of once in a lifetime opportunity, and that the fear of missing out without the necessary knowledge or foundation for you to be able to continue it, because the idea that you will learn as you grow, right? In their world, they create generalists and not specialists because it creates a situation where people are at a loss of direction, a continuous disorientation to what path you want to take because there are too many options available. This is the choice bias. You tend to choose options that are more appealing or attractive to you as a person intrinsically, and the more other that is not attractive or you believe to not align or for the values it does not align with. This is why decision making is so hard when you are at the chip aisle in the supermarket. You have minimal knowledge on things, yet you are pushed to seize opportunities that you are unable to fully weigh and assess without knowledge. This creates situations where you, as a person pushed by this narrative, find yourself in compromising positions where you do not know what to do without the pre-existing knowledge needed to excel and minimal performance in the workplace. What layers of society are we talking about? Too simple to be inclusive in this debate. First, the educated, which represents the minorities debate. The Xuéxi narrative will at least be sort of mitigated by them, the people who have the safety net, because they have an understanding of risk-benefit ratios and they have people around them who are smart enough to tell them on what to do and what to not do. So second, but even the educated has people that will just do anything for a quick buck, which they call opportunities or opportunists. For example, middle class people falling into crypto scams because it's only a 1 month opportunity before the coin gets too expensive to buy. By the end of the day, they have the financial basis, the financial knowledge to be able to recover for them. Third, this is exacerbated by the fact the go get the opportunity first because it may not come again. A narrative comes as a plague even in the current status quo from scam gurus. Second, the most vulnerable actor or the uneducated people, which represents the majority of the people, especially in less developed regions who do not have the necessary knowledge background or financial safety net. Three layers. First is what happens when you feed the Xuéxi narrative to the uneducated. They will just use this as a superior philosophy and jump into opportunities because they don't know better from themselves. They have not been privileged enough to be as critical as other people. And even if the opposition like to say there are people who teach you how to be critical, etc., we see that in a capitalistic model where it still pushes you to be able to churn enough money, we see that people will still abandon education or learning fully for in favor of having that quick buck. Second, the biggest example of this is 20,000 people falling into job scams that require no experience in Myanmar and get themselves trafficked in the end because they are made to believe that opportunities for double-digit salaries will not ever come again. So in this lifetime, I have to seize this opportunity. Third layer, you allow people to prey on others with this narrative that their survival doesn't matter unless they seize the opportunity and come out of the other side stronger than they were before. So then the counter narrative is simple because the current narrative in the status quo is that you have to hustle, take any opportunities you can get, and as a fiat debate, when the searching norm becomes normalized, people will experience much more failure. What we need is a more balanced narrative that even if it does make things more stagnant, at least we protect the vulnerable actors in the end, which is learning before you take opportunities itself, which makes people pause before taking risky, uninformed opportunities. One simple argument, it compromises a lot of people's well-being. When you effectively push people to enter any space without premeditated intentions of knowledge, you are forced onto a blind path akin to a baby born into the world. You have minimal knowledge and you are forced to learn as You go in such a way that if you fail, you fail. The opportunity will no longer be yours. The door to more opportunities will close, and it creates this psychological pressure and demand for you to concentrate your resources into this one basket. Your eggs will be in one basket, and that risk compounds over time as you continue to put more of your eggs. The limited knowledge that you learn from the opportunities in the basket, cataloging your experience, and that all boils down to your ability to navigate the situation in such a way that in your incompetence doesn't show. Negative might say that there are people who are competent in their ability to navigate tough situations, but we say this is still a small number of people who possess the inherent street smarts to be able to navigate it, which not a lot of people have. Yes, there are people still, but it's not a significant amount for the magnitude of actors that we are trying to cater in this debate, which are mediocre people who do not have the necessary connections or the financial safety nets or the knowledge safety nets of their parents to back them up if something does happen. So then education becomes their only safety net that we need to enforce upon them to make sure that they do not make uninformed life decisions that threatens their well-being. So this means that with this narrative, people who don't have safety nets are forced to jump or forced at least pushed then because this narrative is normalized to jump into any opportunity they see with the belief that this is for the betterment of their future without taking into account their own present survival. This means forcing yourself to compete on weekends, juggling studies and a full-time job at the same time because you feel like you'd miss opportunities. It is a hive mind mentality that forces you to shoulder as much burden as you can because if not, you're going to get left behind in the capitalistic world. If they say there are success stories, but we say yes, that's a one in a million because when we look back at those people, they have enough perseverance, they have enough resilience that not everyone has, not the emotional intelligence that not everyone has to be able to navigate these sort of situations. So still their benefit is still very marginal. This not only happens on an individual but also on a macro level. But first, individual, people will jump on any opportunity because they internalize the narrative as its most optimistic form of learning, despite everyone having different capabilities and speed in learning. This means everyone will believe that they are special and that this narrative applies to them too. I will seize this opportunity, get a job before I graduate because it's more attractive to work than to learn because I need this money and I can just learn later. I can just quit my job later and go to university again, which this leads them down to the drain where then this opportunity is their only chance at survivability because you lock them out of possibly learning or taking other opportunities because they believe this is the one and this has to be the one for me because if not then it means I've wasted my time on nothing. It's harmful all in one mindset, all eggs in the basket. On the macro level, you are training an entire generation or and a community to continue to chase opportunities that creates instant gratification on the idea of success that is not sustainable. You create younger generations that force themselves to take any opportunity because they think that's the only way for them to not be left behind in this capitalistic world and there is no alternative. But by regretting this motion, at the very least, we are telling people that there's merit in learning, there's merit in having discernment, and that it is okay to take your time in life because it's inherently yours. Opportunities will come by, but what is meant for you will never miss you. We create the most basic safety net for the most vulnerable actors by prioritizing knowledge and education rather than choosing an opportunity that doesn't guarantee and can possibly lock one person out of any other opportunity they have in their life because the idea that I can just learn later, which then incentivizes people to abandon knowledge for the capitalistic gain of money brought to propose.
Thank you, First Anne, for the fine speech to open the case from negative, calling First Mike, you're here.
Audible.
Oh, yes, you are.
Wait. Okay, I don't know why the background's still like that, but whatever. I'm visible as well.
You were feasible, but your video was a bit laggy.
Yeah, I'll just close it down then. Follow it up. So I won't affect my voice. Okay. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We say that life is a lifelong journey of making mistakes where we're always progressing and always learning. There's actually no way for us to be able to know everything and to actually know it all. And this is why the glorification is fun, because the opportunities in the current status quo are already limited enough. So not taking the opportunities you're offered under the guise that you have not learned enough, that you don't know enough, you're not comfortable enough to do it, is actually very, very bad. We think that the risks and mistakes that are going to happen is so much better than living with the regrets of the what ifs and such. We think that the opportunities that are given to you is something that are actually to what you desire and something that you want, and we said it's a good thing for this narrative to be glorified. First, a few setup. One, the status quo, and like why it's actually good that this narrative is glorified. We think that the current world we're living in is already super depressing. The state of the world is bad, and like everything is just super super bad. And also society is as well is also pushing you to take the quote unquote safest possible thing, aka going and being in the generic route. For example, like for example, one, the focus that you have to take a quote unquote like more safe job, like because obviously a lot of uncertainty with the job market, your parents also asking you to take like maybe get account do accounting instead of like an English degree, for example, and also playing it safe, meaning that you're not taking any chances at all to pursue other things. Like your parents telling you to like maybe take STEM, maybe take law. With how unstable the world is, basically already incentivized at such a young age to not take the risk. This is why we think that the glorification of this narrative is actually really good because it wants you to take the risk. It wants you to actually take the opportunity. Because again, we already see like how few and how little opportunities that we have right now. So why not just take it even though you know you're probably not good enough at it? And also this kind of goes on to my second point, which is like how the society kind of shames you as well for not being good enough at a thing, so you don't have to like maybe take the opportunity to take it. Like cringe culture is basically that. Basically, like people never really take the chance to actually start things because they're scared of being shamed. They're scared of basically flopping. They're scared of being a failure, for example. You never take the leap of faith of actually trying to go maybe into writing, for example, or maybe to sculpting, maybe to painting, because you're scared. What if my writing is bad? What if my sculpting is bad? What if my FX is bad? Like so much of this emphasis just makes it harder for you to actually like take the risk, take the leap of faith. It's things that we don't want. We want you to embrace the mistakes, embrace possible failures, embrace the cringe. And this is why we think that this narrative is like very, very good. And we think this also like just as and we think that the world in affirmative side is like kind of miserable way to live because you're just basically like living not even for the sake of you, but like for the sake of capitalism. This is something we don't want in and of itself. And also we think that the opportunities given towards us does not have to be something maybe like a bit bigger or like very scary. Like example, maybe like I don't know, going into debt to make a small business, for example. It could be the little things in life. For example, me. I was already like in my college like English theater department. I was fairly good at it since the specialized knowledge of knowing how to operate and design theater lighting is kind of to come by. And I dropped that when I said yes to Steffi, what I want to do, what she asked me to do NUDC. Like so I'm like basically going to NUDC when I don't know nothing as their N1 with the seniors I'm in the team right now. Like I took that option that my friend might not even want to take because at the time I don't know anything about debating. I don't know anything about judging. Yet I threw theater, which is more stable in my department, which is more funded even, which is like just maybe just generally better for me. And I threw theater away for debating in itself. Because I think if I didn't say yes, obviously I wouldn't be here taking an IVED right now, and I wouldn't be meeting so many people in the community. This is the kind of things that we want people to take. This is the kind of leap of faith that we want people to take. Since again, even though I don't know if I'm going to be good at it or not, I'm actually trying it. I'll actually hold out, and if I don't like try and take it, what I'll probably think about the what if, which is the regrets that we don't want people to have. And also, who are this like narrative going to be for anywhere? Like, why is going to be good for them as well? A few people. First, it's going to be the younger people like you and me, like everyone else in the room. It's basically the people who hopefully you guys still have like parents and such, and like the younger ones who still have the stability and the funds to actually do things, who can actually take the leap of faith, who can actually take the opportunity to actually embrace the opportunity when they have the time to actually progress within their life. Because when you have the chance to do this like right now in this stage of your life, you can take it because maybe later in your life, maybe when you're like older, maybe your parents are old, maybe they have passed away, so it's harder to opt out of the life you have already carved, but you don't take the opportunity. It is harder for you, maybe when you're older, to take the quote unquote less safe route when the options are there for you because you think, oh, I already have like other like kewajiban, for example. Maybe I need to like pay my kids' schools. Maybe I need to do this, I need to do that. Like, yeah. Because again, we think that taking the opportunity now, even yes, with the risk or maybe with the possible like feeling of not being quote unquote good at is actually okay. Because again, no person can actually become the best of anything. There's no person who thinks they don't have anything else to learn in the world. So we think it is fine to actually take the risk and actually try it out in and of itself. And secondly, these are people who are also like having maybe their quarter life or midlife crisis. Because again, it is never too late. We're pushing them to actually take the opportunity given to them. We're actually giving them like the push to actually maybe, hey, maybe you should do this because it's not too late. Maybe people who are in this like midlife or like quarter life crisis is already in their like very stuffy 9 to 5 job for like a very long time, which maybe does not even bring them any joy at all because it's the route that the society have pushed them to take, and they maybe won't take the opportunities that are given to them, maybe like with art, photography, writing, for example. And now they can possibly take this chance since now there's the glorification of it. They know that the people are actually going to support them, the people are actually going to be helpful for towards them because now they know I don't have to be a master to actually start in the first place. I don't have to be maybe a very insanely good writer, for example, to actually start writing. I can just start now. I don't have to be super duper good at it. We think that affirmative and also say that the risks are bad and like maybe the safe route is the best possible route. We think that like we think that there's more just benefits toward this, in our opinion, to actually taking the risk and actually taking the opportunity and taking the and like pushing with the glorification of the narrative. Two benefits. One, you'll have more options. Why is that? Because again, the current like narrative in society right now is not the slasher. It's not like the slasher that wants you to take opportunity and make you learn later. No, it's basically the quote unquote like safer route. Basically, they put you if you want to get into a career, for example, you'll do maybe like I don't know IBM or like you maybe do like a business degree or like maybe an accounting degree, for example. And like there are just more options than that in the universe. That you can do other things. You can do other things than just being a consultant or doing computer science. And this is why we want people to take it because now they know that there's actually more options than just being an accountant. There are more options than just being a consultant. There are more options as being like a programmer, for example. This is what we want them to take. We wanted them to take these options, no matter how big and small, and actually take it so there will be like less regret in of itself. And second benefit is the fulfillment that you will gain as an individual when you're taking this. Because you will gain more fulfillment in life than just pondering about the what if and the regrets of not taking the option because you think you're not good enough at it. For example, me again, I know for a fact that I will be pondering for the rest of my life, maybe if I didn't take the leap of faith of saying yes to Steffi to win anyone in DC when I don't know anything about it or debating. Like this is something that will possibly haunt you for years. And like now you'll actually get the fulfillment of like doing it when you take the leap of faith and the jump as well. And maybe thirdly, also what if you fail, you think that is you will still somewhat be satisfied in of itself as well. When you don't take that opportunity, you'll be haunted by the what if, by the regrets, by the possibilities of it all. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, First Night, for the fine speech, extending the case from affirmative, calling second F. Here.
Okay, before I start my speech, please mind the background noises because I lagi sembayang right now, so I'm very sorry for the background noises. But if I'm not clear, please just let me know. Okay, so starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The reason why a lot of new gens now are starting to promote mending kerja daripada lanjut kuliah is because of this Xuéxi narrative that sounds good on theory but realistically does not fit within our capitalistic status quo, where the leisure to learn is actually a luxury that most individuals, aka the average person, do not possess. By glorifying the practically screw it we ball mentality, your world are pushing people into a narrative where the cost of initial failure is permanent displacement and then just a learning moment. Clarifications before I start onto my rebuttals and also arguments. First, we will get rid of stagnancy as well, because now people stop just doing, but take time to reflect and learning before you jump into opportunities that are too big for their plate. Learning first can get you to better positions rather than just job hopping all the time. And two, most opportunities require you to reach a certain threshold of knowledge anyway, like going to be picked for NUDC, for example. So most opportunities that just ask you to come with no knowledge usually are scams. Now, before I start to my argument, a few points of rebuttals. First, on priority, they say prioritizing learning phase is just favoring the elite, or because they are the one who framed the foundation of preparation as a form of gatekeeping, because they are the ones with academic success. But we can flip this argument by saying that the elite will still still manipulate under their side anyway, but this time they will be the ones making predatory promises in the forms of opportunities, and they are still the ones likely to succeed in these opportunities anyways, because they are the ones with safety nets to counterbalance the risk. But at least under our side, we won't be spewing out narratives that gives these underprivileged people or just the average person a false sense of agency and hope to jump into a decision that they probably don't even realize are not actually built for them. More on this on my argument, but before that, number two is when they talk about opportunities are already limited, you'll never 100% learn and be ready for everything. If we are going to talk about embracing failure, then panels, we have to remind ourselves how failure looks like under their side versus how it looks like under our side, especially for non-privileged actors. So the moment under their side, these underprivileged actors hop onto a new job or maybe start a business, even though they aren't technically ready for it, that doesn't mean that they don't have to sacrifice their current steadiness, because there is no opportunity that is just that good. Under their side, the moment that you fail, you do not have the safety net to get back to that steadiness. So until this point of the debate, all of the examples that LO has given us is the prime example of people who have the safety net and not the vulnerable actor we discussed in the first place. So their burden is still unanswered, and our counter narrative is as simple as making informed decisions on risky opportunities, because op is best case by saying that assuming it will succeed. So they do not have any regrets, which is not reflective of the reality where people struggle to survive and taking uninformed opportunities to risk their risking their livelihood. Now onto my argument. So the Xuéxi narrative assumes that once an opportunity is seized, then that person will automatically have the time and the opportunity to learn the required skills within whatever that is the new placement that they got into. Note that opportunities does not equal to learning opportunities. As an average person, learning may just sound like opening a book and then understanding it, memorizing it. But in reality, to learn, your brain needs to be in the psychological readiness. You need the capacity, etc. And of course, resources that an unprepared high-stakes environment that you took by taking that opportunity does not provide. A few layers then. One, when someone jumps into an important role or starts a business without preparation, then they are automatically in basically survival mode, right? And they need to take and manage choices and immediacies, especially when they're in crisis, rather than just engaging in learning. Even if opposition wants to say that their very work will be the learning enough, we think that this is too best case and it's highly unrealistic anyway, because you thinking that you can automatically do 100% of said work naturally, and even so, even if so, you won't be able to grow from that since you don't even understand the baseline. And the second layer, the capitalistic world has a system that is peak efficiency and basically focusing on maximizing profit as much as possible. And in this status quo, the opportunity is often sealed with contracts, with strict performance metrics, for example. So if you take the role that you aren't ready for, then the system is not going to give you the leisure to study. Instead, they will just fire or maybe replace you as easy as that, risking your professional reputation and your financial stability for a chance that you weren't even ready to begin with. But you didn't know that because of the rise of this narrative, and you have risked everything already. And those layers only apply to the average person, by the way. What happens to the underprivileged under your world? One, the Xuéxi narrative is marketed by and for those in higher socioeconomic tiers who have this financial buffer to figure it out while failing. And two, this narrative is also just a weapon for companies to justify high turnover environments, for example, exploiting a person's a want to grow to induce them into overworking in roles that they aren't equipped for. So what are the impacts here? So this narrative first tricks the underprivileged people who already have low financial or media or whatever literacy, and they also have not as good as the education as the privileged people, right? Into believing that this narrative is a universal equalizer. We already see this with like in real life with oh, this guy doesn't go to college, but he's a millionaire mentality. That is somehow still very famous within young people, by the way. And then they will be incentivized to bypass preparation in favor for basically gambling. And then B, this narrative also devalues the learning phase and tells the underprivileged that their lack of technical and financial or whatever literacy is not a barrier, basically giving them a false sense of agency, leading them to enter complex professional fields where they will be outmatched. This looks like the rise of predatory contracts with loans or gigs that actually have zero protection, but these underprivileged people cannot really understand and read into the risk, especially not when they are usually in time crunches like Debs, where they want to find the easiest way to get money as fast as possible, as much as possible. These rises are even worsened via traps in easily accessible medias, right? Like social media, we see ads that, oh yeah, we guarantee we won't take your money or anything, but it's actually just a predatory contract. So what do we want instead under our side as a comparison is the normalization of the learning phase. And like, for example, glorifying finding scholarships and high education, even though, yes, it takes time and effort and does not 100% guarantee your future. And we will still protect the marginalized by normalizing small hustles and not the hustle culture of the status quo that keeps saying that if you don't work in this top 10 corpus, you're basically a failure. Even though, yes, it's a small possibility for these marginalized people to be able to join the elites after studying, but at least they will then have the foundation to do whatever it is in their field that can pass down semangat to pursue education and the importance of learning to their new generation. Proud to propose.
Thank you, second F, for the fine speech, extending the case of negative, calling second IQ here.
Okay, audible? All clear? All good?
All clear.
Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Let's just go through affirmative claims one by one and prove to you why this is very extreme, right? The first push coming from affirmative is that no one under capitalism has the safety net to explore. Everyone is in survival mode, so you should just prioritize the safe choices that you can learn and prepare for first, so you can secure basic necessity and survive, right? I think from the get-go, this is quite an extreme claim. To some extent, I do agree that capitalism is currently squeezing us quite hard, but that does not mean that you lose out on all possible delta on agency, right? Four structural reasons of why this is true. One, to a large extent, societal narratives like, Xuéxí or like hustle culture and everything generally more strongly affects people who already have some level of access towards education and choice when it comes to, for instance, what kind of education that one. Otherwise, this narrative is kind of meaningless because if you are indeed so poor that you have no choice but to work now, you probably will just pick up a low-skill, safe job to survive for now instead of like pursuing a vocational and university education for the possibility of a higher-paying job in the future, right? So those people, unfortunately, kind of falls out of this debate because regardless of whether or not this narrative exists, this narrative is not the primary decider for them on whether or not they want to make this major decision about life. But also, second, I think affirmative misunderstands that this is a choice between learning or doing. Under negative, you will still learn. You will still try to get good and extract value out of an opportunity. You just dare to take the opportunity when you do not have that like education to be able to be really good at it, right? You are not as ashamed to be stupid in a new job. You don't need to, if someone actually tells you, hey, I trust you enough to be my accountant, don't worry that you are not a sarjana accountant, we're gonna get you training and maybe in the future you can get the certification. Instead of like saying, I will be stupid at this, I would rather just do something that I'm already good at, you are going to say yes to this opportunity, right? I think affirmative also kind of makes the mistake of assuming that the risk has to be the most extreme possible scenarios in which an individual can face, right? Which they can, if that is the case, then sure, they can very easily say that the risk of losing is never worth it. But I think the kind of risk that you take due to this narrative kind of scales with your current situation and current possibilities, right? Society's most vulnerable doesn't look like people who are contemplating a university degree. They look like the tukang becak who will call you a young university student boss and treat you like royalty simply because they have internalized that culture of shame, because they have already killed the idea that they can be anything more, that they can ascend the social ladder, and would 100% of the time refuse any opportunity given to them simply out of the chance of like, you know what, I don't think I have it in me because society says that it's cringe, because society shames me for daring to dream to be bigger, right? There are much smaller risks that they can take to gain marginal improvement in their living condition. They can risk taking a free class to get a package SMA degree so they can apply for jobs that require an SMA degree. And the risk is there is that, they don't pass the test and like, they have wasted 6 months. Maybe they gain marginally less income during the 6 months. But I think it is worth it because, again, I think Affirmative makes a fourth mistake here, which is to assume that just because someone is structurally underprivileged, they also lack the agency and also lack the possibility, the potential in them to be able to improve themselves, to be able to do good, and to be able to make use of these opportunities if actually given the resources, right? Their response to this is just saying that, these kind of opportunities are exclusively scams that will send you to, like human labor camps to run judo in Myanmar. I don't think this is the case, right? There exists a lot of these opportunities that are not straight up scams. I think governments in general have an incentive to improve the economy to make sure people can pick up higher skilled jobs so they can, get higher paying jobs that generate more tax money, that even if the government is corrupt, there is just more money going around in general, right? I think this is why Xuéxi narrative is important. It gives people the courage to actually say, it's okay for me to try this new thing and suck at it for now because learning can always be done later. That's kind of the thing, right? It's not an exclusive choice between learning and not learning. But sort of like the second push coming from Affirmative then is that they are saying that you will be very irrational. They say that people are biased towards choices that are attractive rather than productive, and that you will be forced to do this due to fear of missing out. I think, one, this is just a very uncharitable because they just kind of assume that people are emotionally unintelligent, but also this ignores the fact that right now the predominant cultural narrative are things like cringe culture. Looks like things like, again, things that put people in their place. And if we want to talk about like, the sort of like interest of the rich and interest of the elite, that is precisely what they want. They want you to believe that you belong to the bottom rungs of society, that you should not even think about climbing up because the risk of climbing up is never worth it. You better be happy with the share that we give you. And here's the big framing coming from negative, right? I think what Affirmative manages to prove is that to some extent, you should make the choices that enable you to live. This is correct. You should probably sell out to some degree to be able to afford living. But also at the end of the day, if they are just going to live for the sake of living, then that life is meaningless. What I can prove to you is that, being able to take that risk is probably going to add a lot more meaning to these people's life, because it's not just about the big major choices like that, right? It's there is of like, you know what, I am a pekerja migran in Jakarta, and right now the money is not that good, but I am going to risk it to pulang kampung and meet my family because that happiness is worth it. Because you know what, I can always learn and improve, and sort of like, this risk is worth it. Increased risk taking is worth it if it means you receive more fulfillment in life. I'm going to just continue with like a very personal story. One of the best decisions I ever made in life happened 2 years ago in March 2024 when Steffi asked me if I wanted to go to NUDC with her, and I said yes. Right? This was a huge risk. I had 2 debate competitions under my belt. I didn't understand these big words like burden fulfillment and mechanization that all of these cool experienced debaters I'll be up against use in their speeches. Obviously, there's that fear of embarrassing myself. What if I take the time, energy, and effort to do this competition only to not break like the last time I went to a national competition? It's cringe and embarrassing to think about what my friends would say. What if I sacrifice my GPA for nothing? And even with all of the structural offers, things that I kind of say, like the government will offer you, right? Like I will have a coach, etc. I need to make this decision that I want to take this opportunity now and just kind of learn later. I would miss out on all of the extra meaning that debating would have added to my life if I decided, you know what, I'll just stay a normal university student who will just stick in his campus, socialize mostly only with people in his campus, etc. Right? And this is the fundamental problem of Affirmative. They probably will be able to secure better survival, but this survival involves not attempting more meaning in life through small choices like this that isn't necessarily about life and death, right? I think I will still remain a broke college student regardless of whether I pick debating or not. These are the kind of marginal sort of like improvements in quality of life that this culture encourages you to do. It helps you make the calculation that yes, there is it manifests in things like, you know what, it's cool to be cringe, it's cool to be struggling, we are all doing this together. But secondly, and most importantly, they miss out on the possibility of social mobility, right? I think to a certain point, if indeed we live in such a capitalistic world in which the hierarchy is enforced to such a degree, then you want people to be take the risk of like, you know what, maybe I want better quality of life, etc. I think even if they fail, right, it's not going to be as extreme as camps, and at the very least they can pat themselves in the back and say that, hey, I have tried. Regardless of the result, I am proud of myself. This kind of internal satisfaction, which is not dependent on capacity, is something that they will never get, because they will always keep up at night thinking, what about that opportunity that I missed out on? I regret my life now. I think it's just so much better if you take the risk.
Thank you, Second, for the fine speech. Now to conclude substantive case from Affirmative, calling third F here.
Hi. Wait, let me drink first and set up my timer. Okay. Before I start my speech, this is going to be sort of sensitive, so trigger warning. Nothing I say is meant to offend anyone because it's for the sake of debate. Yeah, pronouns are he and him. Of course, no POIs. I'm starting my speech in, wait, hold on. In 3, 2, and 1. Judge, we regret the glorification of Xuéxi because of all the times people suffered by jumping the gun and taking opportunities without pausing first and just thinking that learning is the easiest part. I hate the fact and I regret the fact that my friend lost 10 million rupiah because of some crypto scam that's a one-time only opportunity and him not learning first of how the crypto market actually works or actually happens. I regret the fact that 20,000 people in Myanmar has been trafficked by the fact that Xuéxi or opportunity over research and learning first plagued their brains. That is why we regret it. Proud to propose. So what is the current narrative of the debate? So the current narrative of the debate that Negative actually came in with is basically one, we do not lose all agency, right? Basically, the societal narratives generally strongly affect those who are educated itself, and what society entails is basically there will still be learning in opportunities at itself, and basically that you should take the opportunity first, then you should learn after itself. One, that is not charitable, and that is very, very lacking, because you cannot just say that, oh, then let's just focus on the educated people, even though then many people actually are affected within the uneducated layer, within low status people, or for example, within the economically margined. They also get these narratives itself from, let's say, media, from TikTok and etc. They tell you to actually just take the opportunities and etc. And that still affects everyone because media is for everyone itself. So basically, that claim is basically mitigated itself. So a lot of things are lacking. But then where do we come in within this debate, right, panel, Judge? Where do you come in? The narrative is basically simple. The glorification basically means viewing this as the superior philosophy that people should opt into. So now you have to look at it in the layers of society that we have given to you. And this is what we have, and this is what Affirmative has given to you, right? The educated is the minority, right? So basically they can mitigate, let's say, over risk taking and etc. But they are still susceptible to overly risky actions, right? The educated class may somewhat use the Xuéxi narrative better, for example, not going overboard because they understand the risk-benefit ratios, right? However, this education does not eliminate the vulnerability within this class. Even the middle class individuals fall into crypto scams like my friend, and investment scams driven by the urgent narratives like limited time opportunity or buy before it's too late, right? Once in a lifetime opportunity, etc. The existing status quo already normalizes a grab the opportunity first mindset pushed by social media. For example, Timothy Ronald, right, and etc. So even if there is mitigation, it is still not completely mitigated. But who is the most vulnerable here, right? And of course, Negative cannot just say, oh, they're not in the debate, because this is really, because people here actually get affected itself, which is the uneducated majority, right? So the uneducated, especially in the less developed regions, right, are the most vulnerable groups. Less access to educational privilege. They are more likely to treat the Xuéxi narrative as what? This philosophy and pursue risky opportunities itself without like critical assessment or learning beforehand, right? So what outcomes does this pose as seen in the status quo, right? For example, this happens. Large-scale job scams that I have said about Myanmar and etc., right? Why? Because it's said that, oh, it's a high-paying job that only happens once in a lifetime and marketed as you can learn while doing the job, right? And that is the narrative that these institutions or this capitalistic model actually use to entice people and to actually scam them and to actually destroy their lives and self. That is why we regret regretted itself because the capitalistic model actually uses this narrative to actually fool these people, and that is why we regret it, right? Another example is the institutions using the Xuéxi narration to create like Ponzi schemes, pyramid schemes, etc. Literally, Judo also uses the Xuéxi narrative because the current dominant norm is the hustle culture itself, right? Or take the opportunities first. So negative cannot tell you this will not happen in their side of the house because it is still prevalent even in the status quo itself. So what is the burden that we bring? Why then should we regret, of course, what all of the things or all of the bad things that happened through the Xuéxi narrative? And secondly, how do we protect the less educated within this narrative, right? Just simple. Through informed decisions instead of Xuéxi, and we'll explain why it's better itself. What are the clashes within this debate, right? The first clash is very, very simple. The stagnancy and regret. That is the biggest problem that is posed by negative itself. As my PM has said, then, what do we say about this? The only safety net for the uneducated is their own knowledge, and as they have a lack of education, we have to push the norm of you studying more, learning more, before jumping into the job positions in front of you or opportunities to get the money first, right? But it is more likely for you to find the other opportunities in the end because of your research or because of your studying itself. And then at least the harm does not hit that hard for our vulnerable actors itself. And what does negative say? Negative says this: opportunities are limited, and at least you will not regret your decisions in the end, even if you make mistakes. I.e., you have to embrace failures and take the chance of trying to write and etc. And you didn't know about NUDC and you joined NUDC and you don't regret it, you love it so much. And secondly, they said that scams do not exist that much, right? The government has incentive to push the job market itself. So what do we have to say about this? Let's weigh it, right? We overweigh them in logical priority. What does that mean? What does negative say? Take the leap of faith to join new things such as writing or NUDC. First of all, writing, etc. are not opportunities. Those are hobbies in which you have to learn first to do those hobbies, right? You have to learn the ABCs first to write, to learn how to hold the guitar first, right? The prerequisite then that is brought on hobbies come from learning first. Secondly, most opportunities require you to reach a certain threshold of knowledge, right? For example, Kajoka won't ever pick me to go to NUDC if I have never learned the bait. So most opportunities that just ask you to come with no knowledge usually are scams, because most opportunities that are good actually need you to be well learned itself. So the prerequisite for opportunities to come is to learn first, learn the bait first, be mentored, and then be chosen, right? There are accreditations as well, for example, online and etc. that are of course free, etc. that you can get to create, let's say, bigger opportunities within the job market that of course negative is trying to push, right? So there is higher satisfaction within the end because now you actually understand how the job market works, and now people think that you're accredited in the end, right? And then we overweigh them on impact and regret, right? What do they say? There will be more regret on negative side. Actually, what will happen? There will be more regret on negative side because it's not only a matter of you not wanting what you want to do, right? In the status quo, the majority are uneducated, and this Xuéxi narrative is pushing the majority to be more desperate, right? Taking anything that is given unto you. And this will be manipulated by institutions, scam actors, etc. So the emphasis that the uneducated is desperate, especially in the lower class. That's why the 20,000 people got trapped in the Myanmar's job scam and human trafficking ring itself. And you do not have the safety net then to get back on your 2 feet if you just use the Xuéxi narrative. So regret will be higher because it's not a mistake that you can get out of, right? Comparatively then, at least, okay, we will be charitable. We cannot mitigate every scams and etc. But at least this normalized narration, right, of you stopping and pausing first is able to make a person pause and say, oh yeah, wait, learning over just taking opportunities from the get-go, yeah. Let me do research first. Let me learn first and let me make an informed decision. That is the narration that we're trying to bring. And at least that creates a pause rather than a lot of people just like going into those opportunities or opting into those opportunities in the end, right? The second clash is basically what? The second clash is protecting the uneducated, right? From our side, the current norm is the hustle grind set, right? Take any opportunity you can, etc. Increases too risky opportunities, it increases the risk taking, and that might harm our vulnerable actors, right? So what do we do then? The counter narrative is what we need is a more balanced narrative that even if it does not make if it does make things more stagnant, right? At least we protect the vulnerable actors in the end, which is the learning before you take opportunity itself in the end, right? And when we say that there are capitalistic models that actually create a worse narrative or create narratives to actually fool our workers and etc., right? Because this world is capitalistic, they use loss aversion, scarcity as a strategy to incentivize people to take risky opportunity itself, right? In the end, then what happens? What negative says is basically they just say that these scams or these strategies do not exist that much because guess what? The government is trying to push, let's say, job markets that are actually genuine, etc. But that doesn't mitigate the current problems within the status quo itself. And secondly, they say what, right? They said that societal narratives generally strongly affect those who are educated itself, which of course that does not happen, right? In the end, within protecting the uneducated, the uneducated, or let's say protecting the welfare of the actors, we actually overweigh them in the likelihood of agency, because we create narrations for people to actually understand then that the capitalistic model is trying to take control of you, and you have to protect yourself, and you have to pause, and you have to research how it works, and etc., rather than just opting into what the capitalist model actually gives to you. And that was not mitigated by negative side. And secondly, we overweigh them on the impact on protection for the vulnerable actors. And that negative claim is just like, oh, it doesn't really mean that there are many scams and etc. And that's why we win this debate and overweight them in all aspects. Proud to propose.
Thank you, third F, for the fine speech. Closing substantive case from Neg. Calling third Neg, you're here.
Okay. Nada, okay. 3, 2, 1. Affirmative's case only runs when people are irrational. That's the entire case that they've pushed for. Why is it that people are not going to be irrational, right? I think Celine already gave you, and Audie as well, gave you a lot of explanations on why this is not true. I think there's just already a lot of narratives that already exist in status quo. For example, like your parents or your family, your community telling you that, hey, you should probably get that really stable job. Let's just focus on your education first, because that is a tested and tried way of life, and this is something that is very stable. Things like being, telling you investing in gold and all of that stuff rather than investing in cryptocurrency also exists. They tell you should take jobs like STEM, law, whatever. There's just a lot of instability in the world that I think that people generally know already. You could just read it off of the internet, especially since how prevalent and how accessible the internet and getting a phone is, that it has ever before in the human history. Therefore, I think the idea that people will become super irrational fall completely under affirmative side. But I'm going to tackle on the two mechanisms that they try to give you by saying that how then that people will be much better on their side. They tell you that first, you get education and you should learn. The second one is that you should take your time and wait. I'm going to disprove every single mechanism that they've given. They try to tell you that, you will get more education, therefore you're going to be better off. I don't really know why this is true, because I think on the irrational decision making, we already disproved that, right? But I think that the example that they give is like, when we will not be able to be scammed by jobs, for example, like the ones in Myanmar. First question is what do you exactly learn for you to not get scammed? This is unclear even until the third speaker. What do you learn for you to not get scammed by cryptocurrency, right? It's unclear. If it is the basic stuff of literally just taking the time to Google things, like asking people's opinions and all of these things, this is something that is also accessible under negative side that we've already explained to you, right? I think the idea that people will Google basic stuff exists on our side because of all the context that Audie and Celine already gave you. But I think two rebuttals on this, right? I think if your vulnerable actor is precisely the poor and educated people, I'm not really sure why all of the very accessible information, even like, Oxford lecturers are literally in the internet. I'm not sure how they can access even meaningful or more higher levels of education. This is just inaccessible on both sides. Second, the idea of once in a lifetime narrative doesn't disappear when you suddenly study, right? I don't know how affirmative mechanism actually proves how their harm disappears. But second, even if you want to talk about how we can get extensive knowledge, for example, let's just go to university and all that stuff. As much as I love my major business management and all that stuff, it's still teaching you mostly theory, right? And I think that's just, accessible in the internet. But even if not, what are the things that are still accessible for the average person for you to actually succeed, right? There are two types of knowledge. One, codified knowledge. This is something that you learn in US university. Second is uncodified knowledge. This is precisely the types of things that you see, for example, like field experience, things that you need to know how to precisely run a business once you actually run it. This looks like trying out that new hobby, trying out that new skills, right? Trying out that new business competition and getting actual connections to people, right? Because they can actually tell you and teach you on uncodified knowledge, people that can give you feedback, people that can give you improvements, right? And this is something that is actually very much accessible on our side, because you just need that like 200,000 for like registration to even access all of these people and connections. But the moment where you just stay behind all of your codified knowledge and do not want to take that step, even trying to get connections and talking to people, trying to even talk to your professor or anything, you just don't get any of these benefits, right? Second mechanism that they try to tell you is that you will take your time. And then until when? This is unclear, right? I think Celine has already, and Audie has already told you that there's just a lot of incentives for you to literally not step out of what society and capitalism tells you, to not go out of your way and try to better your situation and stuff like that. And it's embarrassing if you fail and try. There's just so much things that actually prevent you from even trying out, right? I think that this narrative actually pushes you and serves as a counterbalance to the overthinking, to the overwhelming narratives that already exist in status quo that we have already explained very much, right? I think next is that just a more nitty-gritty is that affirmative case only runs in the sense that people are irrational. Look, if it's so simple for you to up and risk all of your life just because someone tells you that you should, I'm not really sure like how studying makes you not irrational, but also to the fact that I think there's just significantly much bigger narratives that exist on our side. They never really explained why that's just untrue. But I'm going to explain just a few weighing then. I think on first is on potential risk and potential benefit, on which one actually is more certain. I think affirmative never really explained why they actually protect people better rather than just saying they will study and wait. Negative already explained to you how there are structures that can protect you and support you. This looks like, for example, when you still are in university, you still are able to try and error, even if, like I trying to go to like debate or anything, right? There are also narratives that actually stop you from entertaining the idea. Let's take their best case scenario that, okay, they will be more prepared. Things like first movers advantage also exist, right? I think like the being one of the first few people that started a debate club or things like that can also look good on your resume, or even just like when you start off a business that they continuously talk about. I think that also works because you might be one of the first ones in your city, the first ones in Jakarta, Surabaya, and all of that stuff. Second, I'm going to weigh on failures and what ifs, right? I think the idea of failure isn't even guaranteed, right? Because I think that the average person naturally knows their capacity, right? I think the person that knows themselves, that knows themselves best is literally themselves. As in, I have like 50 million in my savings. I have access money to try in this new business that doesn't really jeopardize my life. I think that I will not just, fuck myself over, because I think the rational decision of the pros and cons is still something that people are able to make anyways. And it's not like suddenly, just because someone tells you that, hey, this opportunity is really rare, suddenly you're going to uproot your life. But I think there are also other structures that help you, right? This looks like your friends and family that can still, tell you whether this is good or not. They can also give you support even if you fail, right? I think people will take degrees of risk to ones that are comfortable, right? Then this is important because the idea of like what ifs is something that will follow you for the rest of your life. This looks like I wasn't able to go to World with Audie and Sophia because my ex told me that debating will not help my career and help my degree in business, and it's not stable, right? But the thing is that things like money is something that is able to be gotten back, but the regret and the choice and the opportunity is something that you will never come back. I will forever be 50 years old and think about, what if I actually went to Sophia? But the thing is that we will always get money back, especially since we've already explained to you all of the structures that make you still rational, but also, again, none of their mechanisms really explain how they even get the benefit. Yeah.
Thank you, third speaker of negative. Now to close the whole case from negative, calling a negative reply. Here.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Three, two, one. I think let's just go through affirmative claim one by one again. They say that you have no. Sorry, this is the wrong speech. Oh yeah, okay. Right? Affirmative says Xuéxi encourages people to fall for Myanmar labor camps and crypto scams. And I'm not saying that these scams don't exist, but affirmative is operating in a world in which these are the only kind of opportunities that exist. Sure, 20,000 people fell for labor camp scams in Myanmar, but every year 1,000 a million uneducated people in Indonesia also took the opportunity to return to school and take the paket C high school exam, right? Opportunity structurally can be good or bad. This is external to the narrative. Regardless of whether Xuéxi exists or not, people who want to scam people into getting traffic will run their scam. The government agencies who want to increase the level of education of the population will also run these programs. These Affirmative say that the opportunities that are good generally require education, so the ones that are accessible to uneducated people are all scams. But this is untrue from the get-go. We tell you that there is a lot of these opportunities at this scale, right? You probably won't be offered to become Komisaris Danantara if you're a random person on the street. And if you do get offered this, sure, that is a scam. But there exists opportunities that scale, right? You might be able to get some education through government programs. You might be a beggar who is offered the opportunity to play at a club instead of on the streets because someone with money like your voice, a family or a friend might notice that you're down on your luck and offer you a job that you're kind of underqualified for with the opportunity to learn on the go instead of go to the college first, right? But the existence of shame culture that these people have otherwise internally killed the idea that can be anything more means that they will reject the opportunities that they have the capacity for. Opportunities that would have provided them with the capacity, rationality, and education to access even better opportunities, right? Xuéxi bridges this. I think Affirmative says that the social pressure that exists otherwise, due to the context of capitalism, hustle culture, and FOMO, will force you to take all of these extra risks without consideration because of social pressure. But I think they forget the idea that society doesn't blindly provide advice either, right? I think it makes sense if this manifests in the sense of your aunt or your mother telling you, you know what, you should go with this uncle and try to jaga toko or whatever. But the idea they will also tell you, oh yeah, that scam, that too good to be too good to be true sounding job offer from Myanmar. Go take that because society do have access to the fact that these are scams, etc., right? And again, it kind of scales. I think you know your own capacity to some extent. You will take more risks, but you also know what is too good to be true for you. But the second thing is that I think Affirmative just kind of runs a case in which this has to always be about life and death decisions, right? Precisely because they believe that only situations, they have a larger response to our case where we illustrate how the increased risk taking leads to more happiness for situations where it's not life and death. Look, the degree to which this narrative can affect decision making scales proportionally with the size of the decision. If it's as big as moving to Myanmar or putting the entirety of your life savings into the hands of a stockbroker you don't know, then other factors will check and balance that risk. You will not just consider, hey, society tells me that it's not cringe to take risks, so I'm gonna take this risk. You will actually consider what's gonna happen to you after you do this, etc., precisely because you know the risk to you. You are already in survival mode, etc., right? But it's the smaller everyday decision that gets affected even more by these decisions when the only thing stopping you is that internalized shame, it's that cringe culture, it's that idea that you shouldn't try to do things beyond your means. It's the thing that's going to stop you from calling that girl. It's the thing that is going to stop you from thinking that, you know what, even as a person in poverty, I deserve an education and should take the opportunity to do so, right? So to summarize, I think the main problem then with Affirmative is that one, this isn't just life and death. Two, the kind of opportunities that exist aren't just scams. And three, even if we live under capitalism in which people seek to extract as much value out of the lower classes as possible, to some extent educating the lower classes, providing them with access to better jobs, etc., are things that are going to increase prosperity for everyone, including those upper classes. I don't know why the only thing that is going to happen is exploitation through labor camps. This is very assertive. Negate.
Thank you. Reply from negative. Now to close Affirmative's case and the whole debate calling F reply. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, setting up timer. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Their picturization of cringe culture suddenly relates to the debate when suddenly relates to the debate when it's about fear of starting, not seizing opportunities. Because then on their side, you're not talking about taking the opportunity and then learning. You're taking simple initiative that now needs a narrative to give you external motivation. So you're debating on whether or not people are motivated while we're talking about the real life implications of this narrative that pushes people who are structurally disadvantaged to take any opportunity available for their survivability. Negative's case is purely based on the ideal world where everyone has the safety net to sustain their life if their opportunity fails them, but that is not reflective of reality here. Not everyone is equipped to take uninformed opportunities because they risk permanent displacement and real risk of survivability. This is not the regret versus shame motion because the risk here is people losing their livelihood, and it's not as simple as regretting not taking the opportunity. Sure, maybe we'll bite the bullet and say that we're talking about extremes, but in reality, these vulnerable actors, the statistics shows that these are the ones that are impacted the most. The people with this narrative get into judo or Myanmar scams because of the need for personal and financial fulfillment instead of simply saying whether I went to NUDC or not. The people who are affected by the media and internalized it in such a way with the pressure to want to marginally improve their life because hobbies aren't enough, finances are more urgent, and that is the type of opportunity that we need to seize because everyone wants to get rich. Everyone wants to have a better quality in life. Because when you're structurally disadvantaged, you are not guaranteed to survive. You will only feel okay if you're financially secure because it's the basic of survivability for a few reasons. First, social media makes living unaffordable because you always want more. The idea of social class mobility is possible by examples of other people, 1 in a million success stories, and that you can be the one, Uncle Sam style. Two, you're pressured by your family to be better than them, to get out of poverty, and it increases risk of risk taking to get that fulfillment, which is not personal but also financial. Third, actual good opportunities are marginal because it depends on your success and being in the right place at the right time, which is not a fate that everyone meets. So DLO's fulfillment is because he managed to get to open semifinal. If he didn't even break, we don't know what fulfillment he gets. Instead, he might regret wasting their time in NUDC. Instead, that it wasn't worth the opportunity first, then learn later. Fourth, so DLO's picturization of cringe culture doesn't contribute to the debate because they aren't able to explain to us why it's so detrimental to one person. Why is the magnitude of regret so large that it affects their ability to function as a person in the future, rather than just saying that I'd be 80 and looking back on life and regretting it. While we have explained to you that the harm on our side is that marginal. So they're talking about hypotheticals while we talk about the reality where people risk life. The scale of impact is clearly different here. Their mitigation doesn't even work because they continue to dismiss that there are still people who do not have access to that very basic knowledge that they need, and the government or state actors don't have the immediate capacity other than to create a counter narrative to ensure people's livelihood rather than them saying, oh, well, eventually the government will make better schools. Girl, look at whoa, MBK. So on the affirmative, it's as simple as making informed decisions, having the knowledge to commit to opportunities and the ability to opt out of it because you have the knowledge to explore other opportunities instead of locking yourself to only one option, which is detrimental to other people's quality of life when it comes to their financial survivability. And so from the get-go, we've been mitigating the risk that exists in the status quo in Xuéxi with the real evidences, but it's never been engaged. They say that you know your own capacity, but you really just don't. That's why these scams are still going on over and over. If the notion of people understanding your capacity already exists, this won't exist at the first place. And so the marginal is desperate, and that desperation is supplied with the stretch generations, and that's why they get into bad positions at the end, as my whip has said. At least we're the ones that engages and solve the problem in the status quo. We regret the amount of horrible things that happen because of the stretchy glorification, rather than just regretting it's cringe to take the opportunities which do not exist in the status quo in the first place, or at least if it does exist, the scale of impact does not outweigh ours. Proud to